My husband humiliated me at our anniversary dinner, but he never expected what I would do next. The soft clinking of glasses and the murmur of low conversations filled the elegantly lit room, each flicker of candlelight casting a warm glow on the delicately set tables. The restaurant, famed for its exquisite cuisine, was a world away from the modest apartment Emily called home, a small space crowded with the gentle clutter of their shared life. Tonight was supposed to be different, an oasis from the daily grind, a celebration of 10 years spent building a life together. Yet beneath her carefully chosen dress, stitched with quiet hope, Emily's nerves simmered, hidden by a tentative smile as she smoothed her hands on her lap. She sat waiting as James chatted with their friends, his laughter booming louder than the soft jazz that normally lulled her into comfort. Years ago, she would have basked in this social glow, but recently, a persistent dull ache settled deep in her stomach every time they were surrounded by others. The subtle glances James cast her way were no longer warm, they carried a weight of impatience Evelyn could not ignore. Her memories of their humble beginnings, scrimping and saving, cooking meals on a rickety stove, dreaming of days like these, had been replaced by an undercurrent of tension that tightened with each passing minute. Then, as the waiter poured her a glass of wine, James rose abruptly, raising his voice to command attention. At first, Emily thought he was about to toast their journey together. Instead, his words sliced through the quiet warmth. 10 years with my wife, the woman who could barely find the right words to order dinner when we first met, what a journey, he sneered, his eyes gleaming with something sharp and cruel. A ripple of laughter followed, but it felt hollow, an echo of discomfort that twisted around Emily's chest like a vice. Heat rushed to her cheeks as the room's attention settled squarely on her. Friends exchanged quick looks, some surprised, others plainly amused. Emily's hands trembled, the wine glass suddenly heavy between her fingers as she glanced helplessly at James. The man she had loved, the partner she had trusted to stand by her side, was making her smaller in front of everyone. She wanted to disappear beneath the weight of the stifling gaze, every word cutting deeper than she expected. The air felt thick, stifling her breath, and wetness pricked at the corners of her eyes, blurred vision threatening to betray her strength. Trembling, she fought the urge to flee, to somehow undo the humiliation by vanishing. The clatter of silverware filled the awkward silence when James turned back to the group, leaving her alone at the table as laughter resumed, colder now, less genuine. The sting of betrayal etched into Emily's skin as she sat, shoulders hunched, trying desperately to gather the shattered pieces of her dignity. The room spun in disorienting circles, the candlelight that once shimmered like hope now cast shadows mocking her trembling form. Those closest to her exchanged sympathetic glances but said nothing. The man she had chosen as her life partner had just shattered her in a place she thought safe. As the night wore on, Emily's thoughts spiraled in a cyclone of shame and confusion. How had their story come to this? Was she truly so laughable? Was her life, her worth, just a punchline for his amusement? Her heart ached, but somewhere beneath the heavy cloak of humiliation, a faint flicker of resilience stirred. What would she do now? The question hovered in the air, as fragile as her trembling hands resting in her lap. Was this the end of the woman she had been, or the beginning of something else? Before the plate of untouched food was cleared away, a silent promise formed in her mind, subtle and unspoken, she would find a way to reclaim herself. For now, those silent tears upon her lashes were held in check, but they whispered of a storm ready to break free. And so, within the gilded cage of that forsaken evening, a seed was planted, the first step toward a journey neither James nor anyone else could foresee. Have you ever faced a moment where you felt completely powerless in the presence of those you love? What did it teach you about your own strength? The days following that humiliating anniversary dinner felt like wading through a thick fog for Emily. She moved through her routines with a mechanical precision, the sharp sting of James's words replaying relentlessly in her mind. Each whisper and glance at work, each hesitated greeting from a neighbor, seemed to echo that night's whispered judgment. Though outwardly composed, inside she was crumbling, swallowed by a suffocating blend of shame and disbelief. How could the man who once vowed to protect her so publicly dismantle her dignity in an instant? The question haunted her every thought. James's cold behavior only added fuel to the smoldering fire of her pain. There was an eerie silence between them at home, broken only by terse exchanges and the clinking of dishes during hurried dinners. He offered no apologies, no glimmers of remorse. Instead, his smirks and dismissive shrugs conveyed a dangerous message: she was no longer worthy of respect, just another mark on his growing list of disappointments. Emily often caught him looking at her with those unreadable eyes when he thought she wasn't watching. They didn't reflect the husband she once knew, they were sharp, distant, calculating. At her job at the small local bookstore, where she found comfort nestled between the worn pages of novels and the quiet presence of bookshelves, Emily confided in her closest friend, Mara. Mara's eyes widened when Emily tentatively described the incident, her outrage barely contained beneath her calm tone. "That man has no right," Mara said firmly. "Anything but love and respect is a betrayal. You deserve so much better, Emily. Don't ever forget that." But those words, warm and reassuring as they were, struggled to reach Emily's heart. The humiliation was like a dark stain she felt invisible beneath, impossible to scrub away. Even at work, whispers seemed to circle whenever James's name came up, subtle sparks of gossip igniting in break rooms and whispered conversations behind hands. The shame that James planted wasn't just in the private nights, it spilled over into every interaction, shadowing her like a persistent cloud. One afternoon, as Emily stacked books on a high shelf, a couple browsing nearby whispered in tones just loud enough to catch her ear. "Did you hear about her anniversary disaster?" "Quite the spectacle," the woman said with a chilling blend of amusement and pity. Emily's cheeks burned crimson, and she clenched her hands at her sides, the paper cuts from the page edges suddenly sharper than she remembered. Emerging from the bookstore felt like stepping into an arena, where invisible eyes pierced her skin and laughter echoed just beyond hearing. At home, the tension thickened. One evening, Emily carefully placed a freshly baked apple pie on the kitchen table, hoping to reclaim a sliver of what their life once was. James barely glanced up from his phone, his reply clipped and cold. "That's not what I wanted tonight." The words hit harder than any public sarcasm. Emily's throat tightened. She had spent the day with trembling hands and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, a small gesture could thaw the freeze between them. Instead, she realized she was chasing a shadow, a mirage of affection that slipped further from her grasp. Days turned into a week, and the few friends who still reached out gave cautious, hesitant smiles, worried about crossing an invisible line. One afternoon, Emily caught herself choking back tears behind the closed door of her bedroom, fingers trembling as she held a folded card from her sister. It read, "You're stronger than you know. Don't let him dim your light." The words offered a fragile lifeline, but the ember of hope flickered faintly under heavy ash. Amidst the storm, a gentle presence began to weave its way into Emily's life. David, a fellow book enthusiast who frequented the store, brought with him a sincere kindness that felt like a balm to her wounded spirit. His conversations never pressed beyond casual friendship but carried a warmth that stirred something long dormant. His laughter was easy, his patience steady, and when he listened, Emily felt the tight coils of anxiety loosen ever so slightly. On a rainy morning, David handed her a small book of poetry, its pages dog-eared and softly worn. "For when words fail," he said, offering a reassuring smile. Emily accepted it, her lips twitching with the faintest trace of gratitude. For the first time in days, the crushing weight inside her chest lifted slightly. Could this be the moment where kindness broke through the shadow of humiliation? But even as that glimmer glowed, Emily knew the road ahead was anything but clear. The voice inside her whispered doubts. Could she reclaim the sense of self James had tried to erode? Was it possible to rise above the pain without breaking completely? The walls she built around herself seemed fragile, and yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker of courage was stirring. What might it take for that flicker to turn into a blaze? Have you ever confronted a moment where those you trusted turned cold and distant? How did you find strength amidst the silence? Emily drifted through her days like a ghost tethered to a life that no longer felt like hers. The kindness from David, a gentle reprieve from the storm, floated just out of reach behind the walls she'd begun to erect around her wounded heart. Yet, despite his warmth and quiet understanding, a suffocating loneliness clung to her like thick fog, blurring the edges of hope. The nights were the hardest. When the world fell silent and the dim glow of the streetlight filtered through their curtains, Emily lay awake, her thoughts relentless intruders. The laughter she once shared with James was now a memory that twisted painfully, like a knife turning softly in her chest. The apartment seemed colder, smaller, and the shadow of his absence in intimacy loomed large. She questioned every smile, every moment of happiness they'd shared, searching desperately for signs she might have missed, clues that could explain the sudden unraveling of their marriage. One evening, after another terse exchange over stale dinner, Emily's resolve finally frayed. Tears traced silent trails down her cheeks as she curled into herself on the faded couch, the worn fabric pressing into her skin. In the quiet, she confessed her fears aloud, to no one but the room's empty air. Am I just a burden? Invisible? Worthless? Her voice cracked, the silence swallowing her words like they were never meant to escape. Work became her refuge and her torment. Each page she shelved, every customer's polite smile, alternated between comforting normalcy and sharp reminders that life outside was unforgiving. Despite Mara's steady friendship, offering listening ears and gentle encouragement, Emily felt the weight dragging her down like an anchor in a deep sea. Some days, she wondered if she would ever break free from this underwater world of doubt and despair. Then the whispers began. Quiet at first, a subtle shift in tone from her coworkers when James's name slipped into conversations, or when she hesitated answering calls. Questions that hung unspoken but heavy. Why hadn't she left? What was she still doing with someone who hurt her so? The judgment was invisible yet suffocating, a silent chorus from which she could not escape. But in those darkest days, a small kindness, like a candle flickering in an endless tunnel, broke through the haze. David never pressured her, never rushed her to share more than she felt comfortable. Instead, he offered quiet companionship, a steady presence in the chaotic whirl of her emotions. One afternoon, after a slow stroll through a neighborhood park, Emily found herself laughing spontaneously at a comment he made. The sound startled her. It had been so long since she'd felt genuine joy. It was this fragile hope that emboldened her to reach out to a support group she had secretly researched one night, her fingers trembling as she typed the message asking for help. She feared judgment and exposure, yet the longing to reclaim herself overpowered the dread. Soon, she found herself surrounded, virtually at first, then in person, by women whose stories echoed her own, tales of heartbreak, resilience, and rebirth. Their strength seeped into her bones, whispering that she was no longer alone. Still, the biggest hurdle loomed, confronting James. Every time she imagined standing up to him, her throat tightened, her voice faltered. The fear of his reaction, the uncertainty of her own strength, spun a tangled web that held her captive. But deep inside, the fire kindled by these new allies and the gentle patience of David smoldered, refusing to be extinguished. One night, as she lay awake replaying the restaurant incident in her mind, the moment when James abandoned her to the scornful gaze of their guests, Emily made a silent vow. No matter the fear, no matter the pain, she would find a way to reclaim her dignity. Her worth was not what James decided it to be. Have you ever felt trapped between fear and hope, unsure if you're brave enough to step into the unknown? What first gave you the courage to break your silence and fight for yourself? The moment Emily hit her darkest low came on a night drenched in bitter cold and relentless rain. James had snapped at her earlier in the evening, mocking her for burning the simple dinner she'd prepared, sneering that she was incapable even of the smallest acts of competence. The words stung, but what shattered her was his cold demand that she leave their shared home for the night, his home, after all. She gathered her few belongings in trembling hands, the familiar walls that once held laughter now echoing with his cruel indifference. Alone in the dark streets, drenched and shivering, Emily felt every shard of humiliation pierce her heart. The pungent stench of damp concrete mingled with the tears burning her eyes as she wandered aimlessly, the city's indifferent lights flickering like distant stars beyond reach. She'd never felt so small, so utterly lost. The weight of years spent trying to hold together a fractured marriage pressed down upon her with crushing force. Every step felt like dragging chains. In the bleak emptiness of that night, a single phone call altered the course of her despair. Mara's voice, warm and unwavering, pierced the isolation. "Emily, I'm coming to get you," she said simply. The promise of company rekindled a fragile thread of hope. When Mara arrived, her car was a sanctuary of soft blankets and reassuring words, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside and within Emily's soul. Over the next days, surrounded by friends who refused to turn away, the harsher edges of Emily's loneliness began to dull. David's quiet support remained a foundation beneath her hesitant steps toward healing. As she reclaimed strength, the decision to confront James crystallized into clarity. She wasn't the woman he tried to diminish in public, nor the shadow he sought to control at home. She was whole, despite his efforts. The confrontation unfolded one chilly afternoon, beneath the soft graying sky of early winter. James, surprised to find Emily waiting at their doorstep, met her gaze with wary eyes. The small crowd of neighbors peeked curiously from behind curtains and cautious glances. Emily's voice trembled at first but grew firmer with each word as she recounted the decade of pain masked beneath politeness. She spoke of the humiliation at the anniversary dinner, the nights lost to silent tears, and the soul-crushing loneliness that followed. The words landed with measured impact, impossible to ignore. James's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of anger and denial. But for the first time, Emily did not back down. She made it clear that she deserved respect, unwavering, unyielding respect, which he had flagrantly denied. The truth hung between them, charged and unrelenting. Bystanders whispered in stunned silence, witnessing a woman who had refused to be broken. In that moment, a shift rippled through the neighborhood. Neighbors who had once whispered rumors now looked on with quiet admiration. Even some of James's closest friends averted their eyes, discomfort evident in their stiff postures. The scales of power tilted, revealing the truth obscured by years of silence. Emily's courage didn't just confront James, it awakened something profound within herself. The chains forged by humiliation began to fall away, replaced by a newfound sense of dignity. The victory was not loud or dramatic, it was a quiet, steady reclaiming of self that resonated far beyond the cold winter afternoon. Looking back, that darkest night was not the end but the beginning, the crucible where Emily's shattered spirit was reforged into something unbreakable. How often do we find that our deepest pain becomes the root of our greatest strength? Have you ever experienced a moment when despair unexpectedly opened a path to hope? The day Emily decided to reclaim her life marked a turning point so profound it felt almost surreal. With a steady resolve beneath her trembling heart, she set out to dismantle the chains James had wrapped around her so tightly for years. The path was not easy, each step toward freedom carved with the weight of fear, uncertainty, and the echoes of past wounds. Yet, as the winter wind bit coldly at her cheeks, she felt something warmer growing inside, a fierce determination to rise beyond the pain. Confronting James was only the beginning. The real battle unfolded in the quiet moments, the small choices to prioritize her own well-being over the shadows he cast. Emily sought legal advice, gathering the knowledge and support required to reclaim her autonomy. The courtroom was intimidating, a harsh stage where past secrets and whispered accusations threatened to unravel her newfound strength. But Emily surprised everyone, most of all herself, with the clarity and conviction she spoke with. The judge listened as she articulated her truth, the public humiliation, the emotional neglect, the relentless erosion of her dignity. James's defense was brittle, his veneer of control cracking under the weight of facts and witnesses she courageously brought forth. Friends who once stood in silence now stepped forward, their testimonies painting a picture starkly different from the polished facade he'd shown the world. The courtroom murmured in surprise as layers of deception peeled away, exposing the cruel reality Emily had endured. Outside the courtroom, David waited, a steady anchor in the chaos. His quiet support was quiet but immeasurably powerful, a reminder that kindness could flourish even in the darkest soil. Emily's smile, tentative at first, grew vivid with relief and hope as they walked together beneath burgeoning spring skies. Each step was a testament to resilience, a deliberate move away from the shadows into a future she was finally choosing for herself. Friends and family rallied around her, their embraces weaving a tapestry of love that had been absent for far too long. Mara's fierce loyalty became a beacon, guiding Emily through the upheaval with unwavering strength. Together, they celebrated small victories, a night out without fear, a morning waking free from dread, the simple joy of laughter shared without reservation. James's presence faded gradually from her daily life, like a distant storm dissolving into the horizon. The man who had once humiliated and diminished her became a chapter closed, not with bitterness, but with quiet resolve. Emily's transformation rippled through the community, inspiring others ensnared in toxic bonds to seek light and liberation. Through the ache of betrayal and the pain of shattered dreams, Emily found a new self, a woman fortified by struggle, defined not by her past wounds but by the courageous steps she took beyond them. Her story became a tapestry of healing, a testament to the indomitable spirit that rises when one refuses to be broken. Have you ever faced a moment when standing up for yourself changed everything? What did you discover about your strength when you finally said enough? Months after the courtroom battles and quiet reckonings, Emily stood in a sunlit garden, the vibrant blooms swaying gently in the breeze, their colors vibrant against the backdrop of a clear blue sky. The air was sweet with the scent of jasmine and new beginnings. She breathed deeply, feeling the sunlight warm her face, a stark contrast to the cold nights that once haunted her memories. This garden was more than just a patch of earth, it was a symbol of her rebirth, the life she had nurtured from the broken soil of her past. Gone were the days when she bowed under the weight of humiliation, shackled by another's cruelty. Now, her shoulders were squared with newfound confidence, and her eyes sparkled with the clarity of one who had reclaimed her narrative. Surrounded by friends who had become family, Emily embraced the unpredictable beauty of the future with open arms. She had learned that dignity was not granted by others, it was fiercely claimed, nurtured in moments of solitude and tenderness alike. Her journey had been marked by tears and tremors, but also by laughter rediscovered, dreams rekindled, and the steady, unshakable truth that love started with oneself. The lessons she carried were etched deep in her heart, that humiliation, no matter how public or raw, could never define her worth, that courage blossoms when fear is met head-on, and that kindness, even from strangers, can kindle the flame of healing. As she held a bouquet of fresh-picked wildflowers, Emily smiled softly, knowing that every thorn had its purpose in the bloom. Her story, once whispered behind closed doors, now carried the weight of hope and resilience, a beacon for others still trapped in the shadows. She had become a testament to the power of transformation, a living reminder that from the darkest moments arise the brightest lights. If you or someone you know is facing a similar struggle, remember that strength often lies in the quietest acts of self-love and the courage to seek help. Healing is not linear, but with each step forward, the heart grows stronger. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and join us for more inspiring journeys. See you in our next story.